Introduction. We live in an era where productivity has become synonymous with constant busyness, immediacy, and overwhelming workloads. Yet this frenzied approach is increasingly leading to burnout, diminished creativity, and a sense that despite working harder than ever, we're accomplishing less of what truly matters. The relentless pursuit of efficiency has inadvertently trapped us in a cycle where visible activity, responding instantly to messages, filling calendars with meetings, and constantly adding to our task lists has become a poor proxy for meaningful accomplishment. What if our current understanding of productivity is fundamentally flawed? By examining both historical examples and contemporary research, we discover that our most influential thinkers and creators often worked at rhythms dramatically different from today's always-on expectations. Their approach wasn't about doing more in less time, but about creating conditions that allowed for deep engagement, natural ebbs and flows of effort, and an unwavering focus on quality. This alternative philosophy, what we might call slow productivity, offers a radical yet practical path towards sustainable accomplishment without exhaustion. It challenges us to reconsider not just how we work, but why we work, providing a framework for reclaiming our professional lives from the tyranny of pseudo-urgency while still producing work that matters. Chapter 1: Pseudo-productivity and its discontents. The modern workplace operates under a curious paradox. Despite unprecedented technological tools designed to make work easier, knowledge workers report feeling more overwhelmed than ever. This disconnect stems from what could be called pseudo-productivity, a system where visible activity serves as the primary metric of contribution, regardless of actual value created. This phenomenon didn't emerge overnight. When knowledge work first became a significant economic sector in the mid-20th century, managers struggled with how to evaluate employee contributions. Unlike manufacturing, where outputs could be counted and timed, cognitive work defied simple measurement. Without concrete productivity metrics, organizations gravitated toward visible busyness as a proxy. The person constantly in meetings, rapidly responding to emails, and working late appeared productive, while someone thinking deeply with few outward signs of activity seemed idle. The digital revolution then supercharged this flawed system. Email, messaging platforms, and collaboration tools created infinite streams of potential activity. Worse, these technologies dissolved traditional boundaries between work and life. The employee who responds at midnight signals their dedication, creating implicit pressure for others to follow suit. The result is what researchers now recognize as attention residue. Even when physically away from work, our minds remain tethered to unfinished tasks and unanswered messages. What makes pseudo-productivity particularly insidious is how it masquerades as dedication while undermining actual accomplishment. Studies show that fragmenting attention across multiple tasks reduces cognitive capacity and increases errors. The constant switching between email, meetings, and actual work prevents the deep thinking necessary for innovation and quality output. Meanwhile, the volume of workplace communication has skyrocketed, not because we have more meaningful things to say, but because responding quickly has become an end in itself. Perhaps most tellingly, when researchers examine highly impactful work across domains, whether scientific breakthroughs, artistic masterpieces, or business innovations, they rarely find it emerging from environments defined by constant interruption and perpetual urgency. Instead, transformative work typically requires protected time, focused attention, and often periods of apparent idleness that allow for synthesis and creativity. Chapter 2: The 3 Principles of Slow Productivity. At its core, slow productivity represents a fundamentally different relationship with professional accomplishment. One built around sustainability and meaning rather than exhaustion and volume. This approach rests on 3 interconnected principles that together form a coherent philosophy of work. The first principle is simply to do fewer things. This means ruthlessly prioritizing commitments and eliminating the non-essential, rather than attempting to squeeze ever more into already overflowing schedules. Research consistently shows that cognitive bandwidth is finite. Attempting to juggle too many projects simultaneously doesn't make us more efficient. It creates an overhead tax of switching costs, divided attention, and increased stress that actually reduces total output. By narrowing focus to fewer high-value activities, we paradoxically accomplish more because each effort receives the concentrated attention it deserves. The second principle involves working at a natural pace, one that respects human cognitive rhythms rather than demanding constant peak performance. Throughout history, creative and intellectual work has followed seasonal patterns with intense periods of production balanced by fallow times for recovery and reflection. Even within shorter timeframes, the most effective thinking often emerges from alternating between focused work and strategic breaks. This principle rejects the industrial era assumption that standardized, continuous effort yields optimal results for knowledge work. The third principle centers on quality over quantity. Rather than measuring productivity by volume of output, slow productivity evaluates work by its impact and excellence. This shift fundamentally changes how success is defined. A single exceptional project that creates lasting value outweighs numerous mediocre efforts quickly forgotten. When quality becomes the North Star, decisions about where to invest time become clearer, and the need for unrelenting activity diminishes. Together, these principles form a cohesive alternative to conventional productivity thinking. They recognize that human cognition isn't like machinery that can be continuously optimized for maximum output. Instead, meaningful accomplishment emerges from creating conditions that honor how our minds actually work through focus, rhythm, and commitment to excellence. The slow productivity approach isn't about doing less work overall, but about ensuring that our efforts align with our capabilities and create lasting value rather than transient busyness. Chapter 3: Do fewer things, quality over quantity. The modern knowledge economy suffers from a dangerous misconception that increasing the number of concurrent projects increases overall productivity. This misconception drives the relentless expansion of commitments until individuals and organizations find themselves stretched so thin that nothing receives adequate attention. The first principle of slow productivity directly challenges this assumption by advocating deliberate limitation of simultaneous commitments. Historical examples repeatedly demonstrate this principle in action. When mathematician Andrew Wiles decided to tackle Fermat's last theorem, one of the most notorious unsolved problems in mathematics, he made a radical decision. He would abandon all unrelated research and minimize teaching obligations to focus exclusively on this single challenge. For 7 years, Wiles worked in near isolation, emerging only when he had completed his groundbreaking proof. Similar stories emerge across domains, from Jane Austen's productive period at Chawton Cottage, where family arrangements protected her from household duties, to Benjamin Franklin's strategic withdrawal from his printing business to pursue scientific and civic projects. The science underlying this principle reveals why diffused attention undermines performance. Each professional commitment generates not just its core work, but an overhead tax of administrative tasks, coordination efforts, and mental bandwidth. As commitments multiply, this overhead grows exponentially until it consumes most available time and energy. Studies in cognitive psychology confirm that attention switching incurs significant mental costs. Every time we pivot between projects, we lose momentum and must re-establish context, sometimes requiring up to 25 minutes to fully re-engage with complex material. Implementing this principle requires both strategic and tactical approaches. Strategically, it means establishing clear criteria for accepting new commitments and ruthlessly evaluating existing ones. Many successful practitioners maintain strict limits, perhaps 3 major projects or a single primary focus with 2 secondary efforts. Tactically, it involves creating systems that protect against continual expansion of responsibilities, such as one in, one out, policies where new commitments require the completion or delegation of existing ones. Critically, doing fewer things doesn't mean accomplishing less over time. Instead, it creates space for the depth and quality that generate truly meaningful outcomes. When writer John McPhee spent weeks contemplating the structure for a complex article while lying under a tree in his backyard, he wasn't being unproductive. He was creating the conditions necessary for excellence. The subsequent article became one of his most celebrated works precisely because he gave it the uninterrupted mental space it required. The courage to limit commitments ultimately stems from recognizing a fundamental truth: attention is our most precious resource. When we spread it too thin, everything suffers. By consciously choosing depth over breadth, we not only produce better work, but reclaim the psychological space necessary for creativity, insight, and sustained engagement with what matters most. Chapter 4. Work at a natural pace, embracing seasonality. Human cognitive performance has never followed the mechanical regularity of factory production. Yet modern work culture often expects knowledge workers to maintain consistent high output regardless of natural rhythms or needs for recovery. The second principle of slow productivity challenges this industrial model by advocating work patterns that respect our inherent cognitive seasonality. Anthropological research offers compelling context for this principle. Studies of pre-agricultural societies reveal that human work patterns evolved with significant variability. Periods of intense activity followed by relative leisure, seasonal shifts in effort, and natural breaks throughout the day. The contemporary expectation of sustained 8-hour productivity blocks runs counter to these deeply embedded patterns. Neuroscience reinforces this understanding, showing that our brains function optimally with alternating periods of focus and recovery across multiple timescales, from minutes to months. Historical examples of intellectual achievement frequently demonstrate this natural pacing. Isaac Newton developed his revolutionary theories not through constant daily application, but in cycles that included intense periods of work interspersed with months of relative inactivity. Georgia O'Keeffe's most productive artistic periods coincided with seasonal retreats to Lake George, where her work rhythms aligned with natural daylight and weather patterns. These weren't indulgences, but essential conditions for their creative accomplishments. Working at a natural pace manifests across multiple timescales. At the daily level, it might involve scheduling focused work during personal peak cognitive hours, while protecting time for reflection and recovery. Weekly rhythms might include designated deep work, days alternating with more collaborative or administrative periods. Seasonally, it could mean planning more intensive project phases during traditionally quieter periods like winter months, while allowing for lighter schedules during family-focused summer weeks. This principle doesn't advocate for reduced total effort, but rather for distributing that effort in ways that maximize effectiveness. Marathon runners don't train by running at race pace every day. They alternate intense workouts with recovery periods, knowing this approach produces better overall performance. Similarly, knowledge workers produce their best results through strategic oscillation between concentrated effort and deliberate recovery. Importantly, embracing natural pace requires resisting cultural pressures that equate constant activity with commitment or value. In many organizations, the ability to work under pressure is celebrated, while requesting adequate time for complex thinking is viewed as a weakness. Changing this dynamic requires both individual boundary setting and organizational culture shifts that recognize the relationship between sustainable rhythms and superior outcomes. Chapter 5. Obsess over quality. Leverage for freedom. The contemporary productivity paradigm often measures success by volume of output emails answered, meetings attended, tasks completed. The third principle of slow productivity inverts this equation by placing quality at the center, suggesting that exceptional work provides leverage that ultimately creates more freedom and sustainability in professional life. This principle draws from domains where quality is unmistakable. In creative fields, the difference between adequate and exceptional work isn't subjective. It manifests in concrete impacts, whether cultural influence, problem-solving effectiveness, or market response. The craftsperson who develops rare skills commands higher rates for fewer hours. The researcher whose insights fundamentally advance understanding gains both recognition and autonomy. The writer whose work resonates deeply with readers builds an audience that supports greater creative freedom. Developing quality requires distinctive mental conditions. First is the space for iteration, the ability to revise, refine, and sometimes completely reimagine approaches until they achieve excellence. When Apple under Steve Jobs reduced their product line by 70%, they weren't becoming less productive but creating the focus necessary for exceptional design. Second is the psychological security to take creative risks without fear that failure will be career-ending. Third is sufficient time for expertise development, the accumulation of knowledge, pattern recognition, and technical skill that enables high-level work. The strategic leverage that comes from quality creates a virtuous cycle. As reputation for excellence grows, opportunities for meaningful work increase, while tolerance for mediocrity decreases. Organizations begin to protect the conditions that enable exceptional contributions rather than demanding continuous visibility. Individuals gain negotiating power for arrangements that support sustainable creativity, whether flexible schedules, focused work periods, or selective collaboration. Implementing this principle begins with identifying the aspects of your work where quality truly matters, where exceptional performance creates disproportionate value. For some roles, this might be client-facing deliverables. For others, strategic thinking or problem-solving. Once identified, these areas receive disproportionate time and attention, protected from the constant interruption that characterizes modern work environments. Secondary responsibilities are streamlined, delegated, or eliminated to preserve capacity for excellence in primary domains. Perhaps counterintuitively, obsessing over quality often leads to more reasonable work demands over time. When standards for excellence are clear, the impossibility of maintaining those standards across too many commitments becomes self-evident. Organizations and individuals faced with undeniable evidence that quality requires focus will often voluntarily limit scope to preserve what matters most. Chapter 6. Traditional knowledge workers versus modern hustle culture. The stark contrast between traditional knowledge work and today's hustle culture reveals much about our changing relationship with productivity. Examining these differences provides both historical perspective and practical insights for contemporary workers seeking more sustainable approaches. Traditional knowledge workers, whether scholars, writers, or independent professionals, typically organize their efforts around discrete projects with natural completion points rather than continuous streams of activity. They measured progress through meaningful milestones rather than daily busyness. John McPhee might spend months researching a single article, Marie Curie years on a particular scientific investigation. This project-centered approach created natural rhythms of intensity followed by completion and recovery. Time boundaries formed another distinctive feature of traditional knowledge work. Before digital connectivity, professional obligations generally remained within defined spaces and hours. Even those deeply devoted to their craft, composers, scientists, authors, typically maintained clear separation between work and other aspects of life. This separation wasn't viewed as a compromise, but as necessary for sustaining long-term creative engagement and preventing burnout. Perhaps most significantly, traditional knowledge workers exercised substantial autonomy over attention allocation. Without the constant pull of digital notifications or expectation of immediate response, they could design environments that protected concentration for hours or even days. Darwin's morning walks, Einstein's violin breaks, and Thoreau's woodland cabin weren't quirky indulgences, but deliberate strategies for maintaining cognitive conditions conducive to insight and originality. Modern hustle culture inverts these patterns. Work becomes measured by continuous activity rather than completed contributions. Digital tools create expectations of perpetual availability and instant response. Professional identities increasingly blur with personal ones as work expands to fill all available space. The resulting environment makes deep concentration increasingly rare, precisely when complex problems demand it most. This historical contrast explains why many contemporary knowledge workers feel simultaneously busy and unproductive. The conditions that traditionally supported meaningful cognitive work, focus, autonomy, completion, have been systematically eroded by technological and cultural shifts that prioritize immediate responsiveness over substantive contribution. Recreating elements of traditional knowledge work doesn't require abandoning modern tools or returning to earlier economic models. Rather, it involves strategic design of work environments and practices that protect cognitive conditions necessary for quality thinking. This might include technology boundaries like designated offline periods, physical spaces optimized for concentration, or communication protocols that respect focused work time. Organizations increasingly recognize that continuous partial attention undermines the complex problem-solving that drives innovation and competitive advantage. Forward-thinking companies now experiment with meeting free days, asynchronous communication patterns, and longer project timelines. All approaches that echo traditional knowledge work while adapting to contemporary contexts. Chapter 7. Implementing slow productivity in various work contexts. Adopting slow productivity principles requires practical strategies tailored to specific work environments. While implementation details vary across contexts, certain fundamental approaches prove effective across a wide range of situations. For those with significant autonomy, freelancers, entrepreneurs, academics, or senior professionals, implementation often begins with calendar management. Rather than allowing schedules to fill reactively, practitioners block substantial time for focused work on priority projects before accommodating other demands. Many successful adopters maintain strict limits on meetings, perhaps 30% of total work time, and designate certain days as meeting-free to protect cognitive continuity. They often implement communication protocols that set expectations for response times, distinguishing between truly urgent matters and those that can wait for designated processing periods. Those working within traditional organizational structures face additional challenges but retain significant implementation options. Boundary setting remains possible through strategies like batching administrative tasks into designated time blocks, establishing office hours for consultation instead of remaining perpetually available, or negotiating focused project time with managers by demonstrating productivity gains. Many find success by making their work processes more visible, showing colleagues how quality outcomes emerge from protected concentration rather than constant availability. Managers and organizational leaders play particularly crucial roles in implementation. By shifting evaluation metrics from activity to outcomes, they create space for team members to work at appropriate paces. Progressive managers implement practices like maker days, where meetings are prohibited, buffer time between major projects to allow for recovery, and reasonable timelines that accommodate deep work rather than perpetual firefighting. They recognize that protecting their teams from interruption often constitutes their most valuable contribution. Digital disciplines form another essential implementation component across all contexts. These include strategic use of notification settings, communication tools configured to minimize distraction, and sometimes radical measures like digital sabbaticals during critical project phases. Many practitioners report transformative results from simple changes like processing email in batches rather than continuously, or establishing technology-free periods during peak creative hours. Physical environment considerations remain surprisingly important even in increasingly virtual work. Dedicated spaces for different work modes, focused creation, collaborative thinking, administrative processing help train the brain to enter appropriate cognitive states. Some practitioners maintain separate devices for different work functions, ensuring that creative work happens on devices free from distracting apps or notifications. Implementation inevitably encounters resistance, both external pushback from those accustomed to immediate access and internal discomfort with changing habitual patterns. Successful practitioners address these challenges through clear communication about new working methods, demonstration of improved outcomes, and sometimes strategic compromise, being more responsive during certain periods to earn freedom during others. Perhaps most importantly, implementation requires patience and persistence. Slow productivity represents a fundamental shift in professional orientation rather than a quick-fix technique. Those who experience its greatest benefits typically describe an evolving practice that deepens over months and years as they discover the specific approaches that best support their cognitive needs and professional contributions. Summary: the philosophy of slow productivity offers a radical yet pragmatic alternative to our culture's frenetic approach to work. By embracing fewer commitments, natural work rhythms, and an unwavering focus on quality, we can create conditions that support both exceptional achievement and sustainable well-being. This approach reconnects us with deeper human wisdom about how meaningful work actually happens, not through constant activity, but through the creation of conditions that allow our cognitive capabilities to flourish. What makes this philosophy particularly powerful is its foundation in both historical precedent and contemporary science. The practices of history's most accomplished thinkers and creators consistently reveal patterns that modern research in cognitive psychology, neuroscience, and productivity studies now validates. When we allow ourselves to work more naturally, with appropriate focus, rhythm, and attention to quality, we don't accomplish less. We accomplish what truly matters, often with greater depth and impact than our perpetually busy counterparts. The path towards slow productivity begins not with adding new techniques to our already overwhelming lives, but with strategic subtraction. removing the excessive commitments, digital distractions, and cultural pressures that fragment our attention and deplete our energy. In their place emerges space for the focused engagement that generates our most meaningful contributions. This shift transforms work from something we endure through increasingly unsustainable effort to an integrated element of a well-lived life. Challenging, engaging, and occasionally demanding, but fundamentally aligned with our cognitive nature rather than constantly fighting against it.